Welcome to the Oral History Podcast, which features stories from the oral history website, voicesofoklahoma.com, where Oklahomans have given generously of their time to tell their life story for present-day listeners and for the generations to come. Our entire collection is available at voicesofoklahoma.com. By subscribing to our podcast, you will be notified of new Oklahoma oral history podcasts. So now listen to another interesting storyteller from voicesofoklahoma.com.
While Billy Parker was a mainstay on country radio, his claim to fame was as an influential disc jockey, not as a performer. Ironically, for all of the top 40 country hits he spun over the course of his decades on the air, not one of them was his own. Born July 19, 1939 in Tuskegee, Oklahoma, he began playing guitar as a child and by the age of 14 had made his professional debut on the Tulsa radio program Big Red Jamboree. A few years later, he began performing in clubs and in 1959 landed his first DJ work. By 1963, Billy was the regular daytime disc jockey on KFDI in Wichita, Kansas, and also hosted a Tulsa television program. In the same year, he cut his first single and was named Mr. DJ USA in a nationwide poll, which helped land him at Nashville, Tennessee's WSM. After his 1966 release, I'm Drinking All the Time, Parker began playing with Ernest Tubb's Troubadours in 1968, staying with the group for 3 years when he joined Tulsa's KVOO. Billy was named Disc Jockey of the Year by the Academy of Country and Western Music in 1975, and he won the award again in 1977, 1978, and 1984. In 1976, he scored his first chart hit with It's Bad When You're Caught with the Goods from the album Average Man. Billy achieved his biggest success in 1982 with the title track from the LP Who's Gonna Sing the Last Country Song. He was inducted into the Country Music Disc Jockey Hall of Fame in 1992. Listen to Billy Parker tell his story on the Oral History website, voicesofoklahoma.com.
My name is John Erling, and today's date is April 16th, 2012. Billy, if you state your full name, your date of birth, and your present age, please.
Billy Joe Parker. I'm 75 years of age, born 7th, 19th, 1937.
We are recording this interview in the recording studios here of voicesofoklahoma.com. Billy, where were you born?
I was born in Tuskegee, Oklahoma, although my birth certificate reads Okemah, Oklahoma, because that's where the courthouse happened to be. But I was born at home in Tuskegee, Oklahoma.
Is that house still standing?
No.
Long gone.
I think a tornado got that house many years ago.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Your mother's name?
My mother's name was Lucille West Parker.
Where did she come from?
She was born in Oklahoma, and my dad was born in Tennessee.
Your father's name?
James Thomas Parker.
Your mother's personality, what was she like?
My mother was very talented, very strict when I was younger, played piano, and I like to feel like that's where I picked up the musical interest years ago at a young age. We used to sing gospel music along with her. She played the piano.
And then your father, did he have musical ability at all?
No, none at all. My father was just a great person. My father was in stature about 5'4", very short. My mother was about 5'8.5". So like Mutt and Jeff type.
What did your father do for a living?
He worked for the WPA many years ago.
The WPA was a government program that built roads and bridges and all at a wonderful time of our country that gave many people many jobs. What did your father do?
My father at that time was in construction and would do anything that the WPA would ask of him, but in later years, we moved out of Tuskegee, Oklahoma. In fact, I was very young at the time. Of course, as I mentioned, I was born there, but at about the age of 2.5, we moved to Bristow, Oklahoma. We lived there, and he still worked for the WPA there.
Was your father a disciplinarian? What kind of guy was he?
He was not strict with me or with my brothers and sister. He was always congenial. Everybody liked him. He had a great personality, sometimes funny.
So I can jump to conclusions here. You got your music from your mother, and you've just described your personality from your dad.
I like to say that, yes.
Right. You mentioned brothers and sisters. Tell us how many brothers and...
I had two brothers, Orrin Lee Parker and James Thomas Parker. Gosh, I miss them. Of course, they're gone now. I have a sister. Her name is Frances Louise Parker. I'm the youngest.
Were any of them musical?
No. They loved music, but none were in the musical vein, no.
When did you first show any interest in music?
Well, after we moved to Tulsa.
So you were in Bristow and then moved to Tulsa?
Yeah, we were in Bristow. My dad got a job at the Douglas Bomber Plant.
Here in Tulsa?
Uh-huh. After we moved here, we moved over on North Utica Street, and we lived there for a couple of years in a rented home. And then we moved from there to 1301 North Cincinnati. I do remember that. And I think that's probably when I can say that I became interested in music, because we had the Grand Ole Opry on every Saturday night from WSM in Nashville. And I remember singing along with Hank Williams, Sr., of course, and with Hank Snow, Ernest, Tubb, and some of the greats in the business. I'd kind of play along with them, but I didn't have a guitar or anything at the time. I played a broomstick, you know.
So
I'll never forget that.
About how old would you have been at that point?
I would have been probably 6 years old.
All right. So it was a very early age.
Yes. Yes.
Did your parents do anything to encourage that at that point, that they could sense something? Or?
They loved music. My dad especially loved country music. In fact, I was so sorry that he couldn't be here in the later years, you know, because things went fairly good because of the business and the people that I was surrounded by. But, yeah, he loved the music business. I remember him taking me to a Hank Williams show at the Brady Theater many years ago, and I remember it so well because we sat there, and at the time at the Brady there were these things that hold the ceiling up. That's where I sat, was behind one, so I had to turn to the left and to the right to watch Hank Williams on stage. But I remember specifically him taking me to that concert with Hank Williams, and that's the only time I really had the opportunity to see him.
So you would have been...
I would have been about 7 years of age at that time, the best I remember.
That had to really impress you then.
It did.
Because you knew you liked music at that point.
I knew I wanted to be in the music world, but I didn't even know really what the music world consists of.
So at 6 or 7, you already projected yourself as being on stage.
I felt it, yes.
Yeah. You went to elementary school here in Tulsa?
Yes, I went to Emerson Elementary School right off of North Cincinnati. We lived on North Cincinnati. I went, I think, through the 5th grade there, and then we moved out east, and I went to Whittier Elementary School for a while.
And then junior high school?
Junior high school, I went to Grover Cleveland Junior High School, which was located in the East Tulsa, or Mid-Tulsa, I should say now.
And then high school?
High school, I didn't. I left school in the middle of the 9th grade at Grover Cleveland Junior High School. I don't have a reason, with the exception of my mother and father separated and divorced. And my brother-in-law and sister lived in McAllister, Oklahoma, and I quit school and moved to McAllister, Oklahoma. Not to the penitentiary. I lived in McAllister, Oklahoma.
So you would have been how old about that time?
14.
So the thing that drove you not to continue your high school was music.
Yeah, in a way. I had a guitar. My mother, when I was 11 years old, bought me a Stella guitar at the pawnshop in Tulsa, I believe on 1st Street in Tulsa. She brought me a guitar, and I got a book called the Mel Bay, the Mel Bay chord book, I believe it was. I learned to play some chords on the guitar, on that old Stella guitar. Didn't play good, but that's how I learned to play. So I had a guitar. I took my guitar, as a matter of fact, caught a bus to McAllister, Oklahoma. I don't know if it was a Greyhound or Continental or what it was, but I caught a bus to McAllister and lived with my sister and my brother-in-law there because he worked for the ammunition depot as a construction worker, an iron worker. So I spent a lot of time in McAlester, Oklahoma.
And again, you moved down there when you were about 14.
Yeah, I was 14 years of age.
All right. So what was your personality like when you were a child? Were you a bashful?
I was very bashful, yeah. I don't know how I had the opportunity to do the things that I did. In fact, I can't remember everything that I had the opportunity to do, but I was bashful and backward, too, I guess. I didn't have the personality to come out and say, hey, I'm a singer, although I would sing in the back room or play disc jockey. I played disc jockey a whole lot with magazines and 2 record players. You're making me remember stuff that I haven't remembered in a while, but I had a nephew that would get in the room with me, and he'd interrupt me when I was reading a commercial from a magazine or whatever, and I remember getting aggravated at him. I'm on the air. That was a long time ago. I was 14.
So then you had 2 callings, actually. You wanted to be on the radio, and you also wanted to be on stage.
Yeah. Automatically. I guess I just had it in my bones. I had the feeling for it, not knowing that I would ever be, but that's what I wanted to be.
You received your first guitar when you were 11 years old. Was there a point you actually performed before people?
I don't remember all the years and the dates, but I remember a boy by the name of Bob Duvall played steel guitar, and I played guitar. We were on Channel 6 back when Channel 6 was the only TV station in Tulsa, on Bob Ladding's Matinee, and you're bringing this out of me. Bob Ladding Matinee, we'd play a country song, of course. We'd usually do 1 song or maybe 2 songs on the show. I think the show was along about noontime. That was experience.
So was that again at 14?
I would think I was a little older than that then, because I came back and lived with my dad in Tulsa later, and we lived over in East Haskell Place, and I can't remember all the things. In fact, I think I've done too much. I can't remember all the things that I've done in sequence.
But was it about 14 or 15 that you were actually really performing?
Yeah, I was on radio in McAlester, Oklahoma at KNED Radio, and we do a show. Carl Grennan had a show, the Carl Grennan Show. It was his show. And I played guitar, terrible guitar. I must add, terrible guitar, not like Roy Clark. But he had a theme song, Hank Snow, Moving On. And I'd play the little, that's about all the guitar I played, and then I'd play some chords. But we'd do a show 15 minutes Monday through Friday, and then 30 minutes on Saturday in the Aldridge Hotel in McAlester, Oklahoma, when I was 14.
So that would be your first professional?
Yeah, that would be my 14. First professional gig, yeah.
About in 1951.
Yeah.
But then you were in Tulsa.
Came back to Tulsa.
About that same age.
Yeah, I came back to Tulsa. Actually, when I was doing the Channel 6 show, it was before I moved to McAlester.
As a youngster then, were you playing in bars?
Not at 14. That came a little later after I moved back. That's when I moved back to Tulsa.
All right. Did you perform the root beer stand in McAlester?
Root beer stand was here out by Crystal City.
Okay. So while you were here in Tulsa, then, you performed at this root beer stand?
Yep. We'd go out on a Sunday. They had a little sort of a stage built at the front of the root beer stand.
Where was that located?
Out by Crystal City, out by Red Fork. I'd get up and play guitar along with a band. I don't remember the band at the time, but I'd get up and play a few songs, and we'd play out there for an hour or so while people drank the root beer. It's kind of a drive-in thing. They just drive up, order the root beer.
You talk about playing guitar, but there was some point here where you were singing, too, I guess.
Well, actually, I always sung because I always loved the Hank Williams songs, and in fact, that's practically all I sung back in the early years. I guess I always sung, even since my mother played piano, and we'd sing the gospel songs mostly. And then I'd sing some country songs, and she could play along with it, too. You know?
So when you were on the radio, like at 14, didn't you join the Big Red Jamboree?
Okay, that's when we came back to Tulsa, and I was with the Big Red Jamboree.
What was the Big Red Jamboree?
Hank Thompson was doing the Big Red Jamboree. and I got to appear on the Big Red Jamboree. It wasn't my show, but I appeared on it.
Both singing and guitar?
Yep, I played guitar and sung, but of course the band done the playing and I done the strumming. But yeah, I always played guitar when I sung.
And again, about 14, 15 years old.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm trying to remember when I was 14 or 15 years old, there was so much happening in my life with my parents divorcing and me trying to live with one of them and trying to live with the other one and then moving to McAllister. There was a lot of things that happened in between and a lot of things that I did that I don't remember very well. Some things I don't even want to remember, but a lot of things I had the opportunity to do. It didn't happen in any particular sequence, it didn't seem like.
Well, the Big Red Jamboree was on what radio station in Tulsa?
It was on the TV station.
TV station?
Yeah, that was on TV.
And how did you get invited to that?
I got invited to that through being on Channel 6. Best I remember, that was the only station here then, you know. That's how I got invited to be on the Big Red Jamboree.
And again, who was it that headed that up, the Big Red Jamboree?
Hank Thompson.
Hank Thompson.
Was the Big Red Jamboree.
So did you have to try out? I mean, this was a big...
No, back in those days, you didn't particularly have to try out if you were picking and grinning and you get on there and do one song, you know. So many things happened over the years, and I'll be truthful, I can't remember. In fact, when you asked me to do this, I thought, how can I remember 75 back to 14 years old and 16 years old and all that? But so many things happened after I left school. Some things good, some things bad.
All right. What about Hank Thompson? What kind of personality was he?
Hank Thompson was one of the finest people that I've ever met. He and Roy Clark were just two of my favorite people. Although I wasn't like next door neighbors or top of the notch friends with them, I respected them so much.
But they must have respected you. Here you were 14, 15 years old.
And I didn't meet Roy till later years.
Right.
You know.
But Hank had to appreciate what you were doing. This young man is here. And
I think he did. I felt like he did. At least he gave us a chance. I didn't have too many conversations or connections with him at the time. It's just like politics. You get in through the back door and you get to work with them, just like later Red Foley and the people that I worked with. It all come through a back door. I didn't force myself in. I just kind of politic myself in.
Well, I'm sure you let somebody know, or word of mouth said, here's a young guy that's pretty talented. Did you do any traveling then at about that age with any group?
No, it stayed pretty well. Of course, in McAllister, when we came back home, I just played around here. You mentioned the bars. I played the Springdale Tavern, and I played a number of bars around at a younger age. When you could, at 17, 18 years old, you know.
You went to work for a radio station in 1959, I believe.
I went to work in 1959 for KFMJ, and they owned a station in Oklahoma City and in Wichita, KFDI in Wichita. I went to work at KFMJ in Tulsa. It used to be Fred and Mary Jones Station, but at the time, I went through 3 different ownerships there, I believe.
Where were they on the dial?
1050.
And obviously a country station.
Yes, it was gospel in the morning till noon and country in the afternoon.
You became a disc jockey on that station?
Yes,
So that was your first radio job?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we're skipping around, but I was working for QuikTrip for Chester Cadjo. I was working for him when they had 3 stores.
What did you do for him?
I was a clerk. I ran the cash register. I was assistant manager. They had a manager and assistant manager in each store, and I was the assistant manager. I worked with Chester Cadjo and for QuikTrip through 6 stores, which the 6th store was on North Main, and there was an ad on KFMJ radio. They were looking for a part-time disc jockey just to do Saturday and Sunday. I was mopping. I remember this as if it were today. I was mopping the floor, had finished my shift, and was mopping up before I left. The ad on the radio, I believe it was Willie the Hillbilly, Hank Stanford, that was doing the promotion that they were looking for a disc jockey for the weekend. I dropped the mop and asked permission from the manager to drive on out on West Edison because it wasn't that far. And I remember driving there and meeting Ron Blue. Ron Blue hired me for the weekend shift that day. And I trained under Willie the Hillbilly and a guy named Johnny Western, not the singer Johnny Western, but a guy that used the name Johnny Western. I trained under them and started playing the tapes on the weekend and then doing some country in the afternoon. It wasn't maybe 2.5, 3 or 4 weeks until Johnny Western, the disc jockey, either retired or they retired him, and they hired me full time.
Wow.
So that's how I got into the business, and I left QuikTrip.
So you were working for QuikTrip and then singing on the side, I suppose.
Yeah, I was working at QuikTrip, worked a full-time job. And then when I was interviewed by Ron Blue and I took the job at KFMJ, that's when I
said goodbye.
Said goodbye and got in the radio business.
Well, you and I share something in common because we were both hired by Ron Blue.
That's right.
Because Ron
we
Blue,
were. That's exactly right.
Ron Blue hired me at KRMG. More on KRMG later. But here he took somebody who'd never been on the radio before as a disc jockey.
Right.
And there had to be something about your personality that he noticed then. You have to give him a lot of credit for taking an inexperienced young man, and he took a chance.
Yes, he did. And evidently, I just beat everybody else there because I threw dust up in the little road that went down to the KFMJ studios getting there because I was wanting the job because I wanted to be in the business. You're bringing things out of me that I forget, but yeah.
So when he hired you full time, what shift were you on?
Any shift they wanted me on, okay? When I went up full time, actually, Willie the Hillbilly was there at the time, and I believe he was doing drive time, and I believe I did 1 to 3 country music-wise.
What kind of songs were you playing about?
I was playing Cowboy Copas, and I was playing Hank Williams, and I was playing Ernest Tubb, and I was playing George Morgan. I could go on and on and on. The older country acts, they were not that old then, but I was playing the kind of music that I loved, you know.
Did Ron know that you were also a musician and a singer?
No, I don't think at the time that we discussed that, but I think at a later date that I talked with him about working some gigs, and I sold one thing that really helped me at the radio station. I sold the Broken Era Hour at $10 a spot, and I filled up the hour. Ron liked that. And also at the same time, if I worked the dates, I could plug the dates. That was kind of our understanding. And I'd do remotes and this type of thing for him, you know, and I get paid to do the remotes. Like I remember Ernest Tubb saying one time, I pay the band weekly, very weekly. Well, we got paid very weekly, but it was fun and the experience was worth more than money.
KFMJ, did that become another station? Did the call letters change on that?
They did in later years, and to be truthful with you, I don't know. I know I went through the folks out of Oklahoma City, and then I went with Oral Roberts. They bought KFMJ. Willard Mason and Bill Nash ran KFMJ under the auspices of the Oral Roberts organization. So I worked for them at KFMJ, and then later George Kravis bought KFMJ, and I worked for them. So actually I worked for KFMJ till 1968.
But then you were making performances.
During all that time, I was making performances either at remotes or in clubs, and like I mentioned, the Springdale Tavern, and many various places. Oshaleta, the Moonglow Hut. Anywhere they'd have me, we'd work, yeah.
Well, you were becoming quite a personality then. The fact that you were on the radio, then you could go out and pick and grin and sing and all that.
The combination is really the whole picture of what drove me through the life of the music business. If it hadn't been for radio, the other wouldn't have happened, the music. And if it hadn't been for me recording at Oral Roberts Studio down on South Boulder, the Ernest Tubb thing wouldn't have happened because I recorded a song called Thanks a Lot.
When did that happen, Thanks a Lot? Was that in 59?
Yep, that was in 1959. I recorded Thanks a Lot in the basement of the Oral Roberts building.
So that was in the same year you went to work for KFMJ.
Right, right.
So things were popping here for you.
Yes. I had good friends in the business, David Ingalls,
who still is today on the radio, and he has
the Oasis Radio Network.
Right.
But I taught him radio.
Oh, really?
Yes.
At KFMJ?
Yes.
And he today is a singer, and then he owns many, many radio stations
Right.
now, Christian radio stations.
I taught him, and he'll tell anyone the way I taught him. He sat down at the board to run the tapes and play the music. I'm not really proud of this, but I walked off and let him have it. Let him learn on his own, you might say, and he did. He still teases me because of that. He said, "You walked off and left me." I said, "Yeah, but you own the radio stations and I'm still working."
Right. Tell me about the song Thanks a Lot. How did that come about?
Marvin McCullough was on KRMG. Marvin was recording for Capitol Records. They sent him the song Thanks a Lot. And he just didn't particularly like it. So he gave me a copy of the dub, we call it, the tape, and said, "Here's a song for you," not thinking that it would be a heck of a song. But Eddie Miller wrote the song, Eddie Miller and Don Sessions out in California. Eddie Miller was from Oklahoma originally, but I didn't know him at the time. So I took the song, and of course at the time I'd have probably took any song. I was wanting to record, and we had the opportunity to record, so I recorded the song called Thanks a Lot. It came out on Cimarron Records, which was owned by Leon McAuliffe. What happened then, and I'm really reaching back in my mind, the song was doing good as a single record and went into the country field, and KAKC here started playing it, and then it got into the pop field here and other places and was coming up on the charts. In our business, when someone records a song that you recorded, they call it a cover record, cover song. And Ernest Tubb covered me on Thanks a Lot in the country field, which was a big hit for Ernest Tubb. And then about 3 months later, I'm just guessing, Brenda Lee recorded the same song in the pop field, and needless to say, they threw me in the ditch. I mean, my song was over then after Ernest recorded it and Brenda recorded it. The pop in the country was over. Although I did get a lot of play and worked some dates on that, and later on went to work for Ernest Tubb. Of course, that's down the road a little
So
bit.
Thanks a Lot was a pop song as you recorded it.
Yeah, it was a pop song, and I'll never forget, John, and you'll appreciate this. Marvin was different. I always knew Marvin, I always liked Marvin. Marvin was very talented. Of course, he gave me the song to record because he didn't want to record it. When it came out on KRMG, he played it for the first time, a 45 RPM record, and he played it all the way through 78 RPM.
Why did he do that?
He was just that type of person. I never could figure out why he did that. And I don't remember whether he ever played it again or not, but he played it 78 speed on KRMG.
Because it was a big hit here.
And I was
in
still
Tulsa.
at KFMJ. Yeah, it was doing good here, of course. KAKC was playing the far out of it. Tom York and everybody at KAKC was really strapping it on it. Scooter C. Graves.
Yeah.
And it was really going good. But, yep, he hit it 78 speed on 45 RPM record, and I was listening.
Wow. What did you think?
You know, I thought, well, that's just Marvin. I
Did
thought
he
maybe he might play it every day from then on, but he didn't. But I don't know. I never could figure it out.
KRMG was playing country music as well, and maybe big band at the same time, or not?
Well, they were playing some country on Marvin's show.
Okay, and
But that's about it.
was that daily, Marvin McCullough?
Uh-huh. His show was daily.
In the afternoon?
He did a morning show and an afternoon show.
Oh.
The best I remember. And then when I left to go with Ernest, he came over to KFMJ.
Was there any talk about you working for KRMG? I mean, there could have been a spot for you there.
No, there never was.
Yeah.
No, I was never approached from the KRMG standpoint by Ron. He had hired me at KFMJ, but I was never.
And then he moved over to KRMG. But I suppose with Marvin there, who was a big personality, wasn't he, on KRMG?
Yes. Ratings good, very good. Had the band and doing the same thing. And I had the band with Rocky Capel and the Shotguns, and we were working out of the KFM. And maybe that's the reason he didn't play
So there was competition both in singing and in radio.
That's right.
So he didn't like that, apparently.
I guess not. But I don't forget it. And in later years, before he passed on, we had the opportunity. He would call me from Fort Smith, Arkansas, and visit with me on the air, but he couldn't talk. He had had a stroke. But his wife at the time would call me and say, Marvin's here and wants to say hello to you. And that's all he could say. And I would talk to him. And then when they moved to Amarillo, before he passed on, I visited with him as they were on the way to Amarillo. I never had any grudge, never held a grudge. He was a very good talent, and I loved him as an entertainer and as a person.
Did the two of you ever talk about that incident of him playing the record?
You know what? I don't. I'm sure someone may have talked about it to him, but I was never one to complain. After that, I don't believe I ever said anything else about that I remember.
There's a story about Thanks a Lot and Harry Truman.
He signed the book for me, and I signed the little 45 RPM Cimarron record to President Truman.
Where did you see him?
I saw him at Independence, Kansas, in his library, in the Truman Library. Sat there in his office and visited with him for at least 30 minutes. In fact, I wondered why we talked so long, but he was the nicest person. I've never met a president or former president before, but he was the nicest person that I've ever met. He was just so congenial and so nice. And we visited, not about anything in particular, not about politics for sure, just about the business, just as you would talk with anybody. I mean, he's just a splendid person. And he signed those 2 books for me. I still have them.
Did you get a sense that he liked country music? You shared that?
You know what? I remember we talked about his daughter was a pianist, you know.
Daughter was Margaret.
Yeah, Margaret Truman. And he talked about her being an artist, playing piano and this type of thing. But he didn't really talk too much about country music, and I didn't either.
When he was president and Margaret would play, some members of the media would criticize her playing, and that upset him a lot.
Yes, because he loved her music, and she played good music, but the critics always had something to say then, and they have something to say now.
Yeah. Well, what a great memory that was for you.
Some things you forget, and at my age, believe me, you can tell by the interview, I forget a lot of things. But the good things, I don't forget. I don't forget people being faithful, and people have been faithful in the radio business to me over the years.
You're there then at KFMJ. Somewhere you're in Wichita, Kansas at KFDI.
Yes.
In 1963.
I moved to KFDI and lived in the back room at the radio station.
You went from KFMJ to Wichita.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
Well, as a matter of fact, I had the opportunity to be on that station there, and we were doing a TV show here at the time, and I'd go up through the week and do my show up there.
So they must have made you a better offer then up there. Is that why you left?
It wasn't too much of an offer then. It was the same company. Okay, same company at the time that I moved to Wichita. And Ron Blue's folks, you know, his father-in-law owned the station in Oklahoma City, station in Tulsa, and the station at KFDI in Wichita. So I more or less transferred, I guess you might say, up there.
But at the same time, you hosted a TV show here in Tulsa.
Yes, I was doing a show here in Tulsa at the time. It was Ray Bradley Chevrolet that sponsored the show on Channel 6. I'd come in and do the show, and the time we'd do the shows live. Gosh, John, you're bringing things out of me. I did a show for Horn Brothers Furniture on Channel 8, for Ernie Miller, Pontiac, GMC on 2 or 3 TV stations in later years. Channel 6, Bradley Chevrolet sponsored that. I had the bands and had various people on.
You were 26, and you had made a pretty big name for yourself here in Tulsa. People knew who Billy Parker was.
Well, because of the remotes and because of the radio and because of the TV things, yes. I guess that I did back then, and at the same time was trying to help make names for other people, too, that were in the business, because I'd have them on the TV shows and radio shows.
And some of those names would have been?
Well, like Johnny Steels in the early years. Johnny Steels, Ted Creekmore, and I played Marvin McCullough. I played his songs and still play them once in a while, even though he played mine on 78. Yeah, I just always tried to, and I still do, I just try to be a friend to everybody, and sometimes it's kind of tough. I'm sure you know what I mean in the business, but I don't want anybody to think any bad things about me, and so I try to help other people at the same time. I always have.
I believe in '63 you cut the song The Line Between Love and Hate.
I did in Nashville.
What happened to that song?
It got some play. It went into the charts. We always got chart action in the early years. Not number one, but we'd get some chart action. And I probably recorded at least 50 or 60 songs. And maybe 5 of them out of those 60 have got pretty good national recognition. One of them being, Lord, if I make it to heaven, can I bring my own angel along? That was in later years. And Who's Going to Sing the Last Country Songs? I've had about 3 or 4 albums out and had a gospel album out. All of it happened around the circumference of life. You know, I mean, I don't even remember. I could tell a lot of stories if I could remember all of them. Like one time I was working at KVOO and Jack Cressy sent us out to Las Vegas for the Roy Clark show. I remember being there with Tom Carter with the Tulsa World as a guest of Roy Clark. Roy had us stand up, and we're glad to have Billy Parker from KVOO in Tulsa with us, and Tom Carter of the Tulsa World. You all stand up. We stood up and waved at everybody, and he said, I just want you all to know they didn't pay a dime to get in here or to fly out here.
Well, along about this time then, when you went to Nashville, you cut the song The Line Between Love and Hate, you were named Mr. DJ USA in a national poll.
Yeah, the WSM radio poll.
How did they know about you at KFDI?
Yeah, KFDI, yes. As a matter of fact, that's where I received that award from, and went to Nashville and visited with Grant Turner at the WSM.
It's interesting how they picked up on you in Wichita, Kansas, and it was a poll on WSM.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was a national poll. You have promoters who promote music, and they did the voting, as they do now. You know, people who belong to the Country Music Association or the Academy of Country Music, the people who belong do the voting. Well, these promoters who belong to the association at that time, whatever it was at the time, they did the voting on the things that you had done for them, I think, more than anything else in promotion. It gets back to politics.
Mm-hmm. You released the song I'm Drinking All the Time?
Yeah, I recorded the song on Decca. Now, that was right before I moved to Nashville. I was working at KFMJ.
That was in 1966.
66, yeah. Yeah, Ernest had already covered me, and Ernest had got me a recording contract with Decca Records. Ernest had got me a recording contract with Owen Bradley. Matter of fact, when I left Nashville, I was still owing Bradley. But anyway.
Did you live in Nashville for a while?
Yeah, but that was 68 when I moved to Nashville.
All right, so you're still here. When did you go to KVOO?
I went to KVOO after the Opry and after Ernest Tubb. That was 1971.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'm Drinking All the Time in 1966. Did that chart very high?
Yeah, it got on the charts. It wasn't a number 1 or number 10. It made it on the charts. They didn't promote a lot. I mean, I was just a newcomer to the label, and they didn't promote a lot. But nevertheless, it got on the charts, and it made the charts in the country field.
Were you writing any songs about this time?
No, I didn't. People thought that I wrote Thanks a Lot, and of course I never was a writer, although I'd written a few songs that didn't amount to much.
Somewhere in here then in 1966 you moved to Nashville?
1968.
Okay, and that's...
I left KFMJ in 1968, and I was working for George Kravis and Carl Smith. I joined Ernest in June of 1968. My father, I know he would have loved to have the opportunity to meet Ernest, but he passed on 2 weeks before I left to join Ernest Tubb and the Troubadours.
So that's why you moved to Nashville?
Yes.
Because that's where he was based?
Yes. Actually, I moved to Hendersonville, which is right outside of Nashville, and bought a house there.
You were about 29 years old then
Yes.
when you joined. How did that come about with Ernest Tubb?
Well, actually, Ernest had recorded the song, Thanks a Lot. Brenda Lee had recorded the song Thanks a Lot, and I'd been to Kane's Ballroom with Ernest many times when he was there to visit, and never did perform with him there till I joined him. Cal Smith and Jack Green were the two guys that worked for him. Jack Green played the drums for Ernest Tubb and the Troubadours. Well, Jack Green had a song called There Goes My Everything that was a #1 hit, and All the Time, which is a #1 hit. He left E.T. and started his own group, Jack Green and the Jolly Green Giants. Cal Smith had a song out called The Lord Knows I'm Drinking and Country Bumpkin, and Country Bumpkin was a gigantic hit for Cal Smith, and he was a front man for Ernest Tubb. They'd been playing a date, and if I'm not mistaken, down around Salisaw, down in that area in Oklahoma. They called me from there and asked me if I'd like to be a Texas Troubadour, because Cal was leaving, forming his own band and going out on his own. Of course, I was married, my wife Jerry, and we had a son, Billy. That's a decision I couldn't make on my own. So I said, boy, I'd love to. And this is what I've been looking forward to, I guess, all my life, to be on the Grand Ole Opry and with Ernest Tubb, or get Nashville, big deal. So we talked it over, and the wife knew that I liked the business and enjoyed the business and thought that was a step up. And so we decided we'd make the move. We lived over in East 5th Street in Tulsa. We had United Van Lines come and pack the stuff and move the furniture and everything to Hendersonville, Tennessee. We'd already been there and found our place and had our place where we were going to live. So we made the move. We got there and joined E.T. and the Troubadours. Just a few days after we got there, I was gone. I was on the road. The first job we worked was in Wisconsin. We did the Ernest Tubb Midnight Jamboree on WSM at midnight and left out for Eau Claire, Wisconsin. It was a long, long road, and it was my first date, and it was a matinee at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I remember Jeannie Seeley, who's an entertainer, a country entertainer and singer. She was on the bus with us, and a couple of more people. Stonewall Jackson, I think, was on. And I was nervous. I mean, I just sat there on the bus. I couldn't sleep because I was nervous, didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I was going to open the show and do probably 3 numbers before I bring E.T. on. It was the longest road that I've ever. We got there about 2 o'clock in the afternoon and got a cleanup room. That's what we called it, a cleanup room to get ready to go over to the show, because we were doing the afternoon matinee. I went on, my knees were knocking. I mean, I'll never forget it as long as I live. Doing the Opry was enough, and then the Midnight Jamboree, and I wasn't quite seated in yet. But I'll never forget doing that show, and there was a lot of good entertainers on the show. We did that show, and I thought, well, this will be my last. This will be my last show, my first and last show on the road. But it worked out good, and everything was good, and that was my first experience, the longest ride I ever took to go do a show without any sleep.
If it was wintertime, it would have been pretty bad.
We're talking about June. Best I remember, it wasn't hot, and the best I remember, we didn't have air conditioning on the old Green Hornet on the bus, like the old Greyhound type bus. It was warm, but it wasn't the middle of summer, so it wasn't that bad.
A little bit about Ernest Tubb. He was nicknamed the Texas Troubadour, wasn't he, at one time? Mm-hmm. And then probably his biggest hit was Walking the Floor Over You.
Yes, that was his first, I think, big hit that he'd had, although he had worked around Texas for a flour mill there and for different things there in Texas before he joined the Grand Ole Opry. The late Jimmy Rogers' wife was a friend of his who helped him get into the business.
And I believe he was the first to record a hit version of Blue Christmas, which was associated with Elvis Presley.
Yes, it was. It certainly was. He recorded it first many, many years ago. I'll have a Blue Christmas Without You. And, of course, that was a great Christmas song for Elvis.
Another hit was Waltz Across Texas.
That was a big hit for E.T. That came in later years, and that was a big hit for E.T. Of course, Thanks a Lot that he recorded and covered me on was one of his biggest hits also.
He didn't really possess the best voice, did he?
He would be probably the first to admit that. He was different. He had the low tone. I guess you might say he was so different, like Hank Snow was different than anyone else. E.T. was different than anyone else. And then people around the country tried to imitate him, you know. I mean, there never was another Ernest Tubb voice, as far as I'm concerned. And the same thing with George Jones. People imitate him everywhere, but it wasn't George, you know. But E.T. had a good following.
But he would make fun of his own voice. In fact, in some recordings, he couldn't hit some of the notes.
But that's exactly right. In the studio, he would have a time, especially in later years. Now, the earlier years, I didn't know. But in the later years, I've been in the studio with him when he was recording. In fact, I played guitar chords, strumming chords behind him. In fact, on a couple of them, I can hear me back there missing a note or two.
He and Red Foley were partners.
Yeah, very good friends, very good friends. I didn't know them together. In fact, I was on the road with E.T. when Red Foley passed on. We were up in New York, I believe, on tour at the time when Red Foley passed on. And, yeah, they were very good friends.
In today's money, I suppose it doesn't sound like much, but were you making some good money back then?
I'll put it this way. We were on the road a lot of days, and we would work pickup dates, you might say, on a Monday and a Tuesday. Now the artists will come in and work Friday and Saturday, and that's all they work. They make enough money to do that. Back then, we would work sometimes 7 days a week, 7 nights a week. But most of the time, we might be off on a Monday, or we'd pick up a date on a Tuesday for less money and work it. If I remember correctly, and I think I do, I think my salary was $40 a day. And I bought my own food and paid my own cleaning. He paid for the hotel room and paid us, as he said, weekly, very weekly. It wasn't bad money back then, you know.
You were supporting a wife and child, and you had purchased a home, had you?
Yep, we bought a home in Hendersonville right out of Nashville.
So you were doing pretty good.
Yeah, we were enjoying it and paying the bills, paying the utilities, not getting rich by any means. And my records definitely weren't paying the way. It just gave me some recognition in the business, you know, which is worth money.
Right.
You know.
What about payola back in those days? How close were you to it, or did you observe it? What was your experience with payola? I
never really had an experience with payola, especially in my recording. Well, I didn't have nothing to pay them in the first place, and Decca wasn't into that realm from the countryside that I know of. The only thing I remember about payola happened at KVOO radio in, I believe it's 71, 72, maybe early 72. A gentleman came through from somewhere in Colorado, Fountain, Colorado, I think. He had a new artist with him. Good singer and a good record, 45 RPM record back in those days. He came in. Before we went on the air, he handed me an envelope. And the envelope was full. I don't know. I couldn't tell you if it was $1 bills, $10 bills, $100 bills, or whatever. But he handed me this envelope and said, I appreciate you helping us out. And this was at KVOO, and I told Jack Cressy about it, too. He handed it to me, and I immediately handed it back to him and said, I can't do this. That's one of my proud moments in radio. I handed it back to him and said, you don't need to do this here at all. And I played the record, interviewed the guy on the all-night show, and they went on about their business. But that's the only time I can remember that I was involved with anything that had anything to do with even the handling of payola.
Well, that was a perfect example. For those who are listening and don't know what that term meant, that was exactly it. A new artist would come through town and then they'd pay you to play them. It wasn't because they were the most popular or they had the most popular song. They were trying to get exposure.
That's exactly right.
And, of course, then eventually that just blew up and became a scandal in the business and obviously did away with it.
And in certain parts of the country, it was really a scandal, you know, in New York and Detroit especially, you know. But no, I never had to pay anything to get a record played at all. And like I say, I didn't have anything to pay.
Well, would you make calls on radio stations and say, I'm a singer and I have a song I'd like for you to play?
Yes, I used to do. In fact, Decca Records promotion people would give me a list of people to call. Say, I thank you for playing the record, or I appreciate it if you get it on the charts. That was back when they played 100 records back in those days, you know, so I could squeeze in there. Nowadays, in the year of 2013, it's a little different.
Mm-hmm. Those were good years. Did you open all the time, those 3 years you were with Ernest Tubb?
Yes.
You were the opening act?
Yes.
So you did the personality and sang and the whole bit, and you enjoyed it.
Yeah, some of the shows I'd do 45 minutes with the band and I, depending on some of the shows, the big package shows, like we work with Johnny Cash or with the Stoneman family or with some of the artists, Stonewall Jackson, whatever, some of the artists we've worked with, I'd just go out and open. I'd do a couple of songs and then the band would do one and we'd bring on E.T. If we were working a club, I'd work about 45 minutes, then we'd bring E.T. on, then we'd take a break, then I'd come back and work another 45 minutes with the band.
Johnny Cash, you mentioned at that time. He was a young Johnny Cash, obviously. Yes. Was he just becoming known? Or
he was already known. He had already been through the Memphis thing, and already been an artist in the business and getting lots of play everywhere. So Johnny was actually a star act. But one thing about Johnny, we'd work a show with Johnny Cash, and because of E.T.'s length of time in the business and his popularity and everything, Johnny is one that would, maybe he was supposed to close the show, and I know of a couple of times, Johnny would tell the promoter, E.T. closes the show. I'm not closing the show. And when he was really the stature in the business to be the one to close the show, the biggest act, he would respect Ernest and would not close the show. He'd let E.T. close the show. That's back when there was a lot of respect in the business by a lot of people.
Remember what song Johnny would have had? He had a hit then by that time?
Well, yeah, he'd had a number of hits by that time. And of course, he and June Carter were married at the time. Mm-hmm. And the Statler brothers were working shows with him. So he was heavy in the business then. And I'm trying to think of particular songs, but he was big in the business.
I'll Walk the Line?
I'll Walk the Line had already been a hit even previous years, yeah.
So then he appeared with Ernest Tubb?
Yeah, on package shows.
Okay.
Say they would book a package show in Canada or Oklahoma or wherever, and he'd just happen to be on the shows with them.
Nice person to be around?
I never did know Johnny that well, even being there, and I never did really get acquainted with him. Of course, he and Ernest were very good friends. Some people you really connect with, some people you don't. It isn't that I didn't connect with him or he didn't connect with me. I just didn't infringe on the territory,
Mm-hmm. While you were performing with Ernest Tubb, some of these bars would have put up chicken wire. Tell us why.
There was one particular bar, let's say club in Texas, dance club, and on a Saturday night they get pretty tough. And there's one particular place, there was a stage on the floor and then there was a second stage like upstairs. The stages had not barbed wire but heavy wire around them because of the fact that people get loaded, and if you don't play the song they liked or whatever, they throw beer bottles up the stage. Now that didn't happen to us per se, but that's why the wire was up there. They never threw any at Ernest that I know of when I was with him, but it was there because of the fact that if they wasn't happy with the way things are going or they get fighting or something, so the band was protected with that wire up there.
Was it with Ernest Tubb that you played those Louisiana clubs?
Yes.
Tell us about them, because I think they were pretty rough.
Well, I worked Cut Off, Louisiana, and I worked the Stagecoach Inn in Houma, Louisiana, and I can remember, I could use a lot of examples in Louisiana, but this particular one, E.T. told us before we went on this first time I'd played there in Houma, Louisiana, he said, the guys will tell you something, in other words, he knew, he'd been there. He'd been a lot of places, and he said, if they start fighting, start arguing, just keep on playing. Don't quit singing and don't quit picking. Just keep on playing, which is logical, You sure don't want to join the fight. And in Houma, sure enough, they did. There was an upstairs and a downstairs, and there was tables everywhere, and they started a good fight. Upstairs, throwing chairs, and downstairs, and everybody gets involved. And I'll never forget, I was singing, man, I kept on. I might have missed a few bars, and I might have been out of tune, but we kept playing right on through the fight. And if I'm not mistaken, on that particular night, we quit early. That was Houma, Louisiana, Stagecoach. I'll never forget it. And Cut Off, Louisiana, I'll never forget. It was a nice place. Good place, a club. And the young, they bring their kids. And I'm talking about young kids. You'd look out there, and there'd be a kid out there maybe 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, drinking beer. I mean, getting that beer down. I learned a lot from E.T. and being on the road with him, but that's a true story. I was there and saw it.
The world's largest dance, was that down there?
That was in Houston. We played that 2 years in a row. I don't remember exact years, but we played it 2 years in a row. 1 year we played it, Ernest Tubb and the Troubadours and Hank Thompson and the Brazos Valley Boys. The stage was kind of high where you could see out over the thing, and there was 20,000 plus people in the Astro Hall. There's the Astro Dome, then there's the Astro Hall. It was the Astro Hall. We'd play that thing, and we'd do the same thing. I'd go and do 45 minutes, then Ernest to come up. And you could look out over the crowd and see the fist fights. Usually it was an hour into the gig, and you could see the fist slinging, and you could see the women fighting. I mean, I don't know what they was fighting about. We just kept playing. The 2 times that I played there, which was a couple of years in a row, I think 1 year we worked it with Conway Twitty. The same hall, Astro Hall. And the same thing, you get that many people together and they get to drink, and somebody's going to be slinging a bottle or a fist or something. So I remember some good times. I didn't get involved. I was kind of a coward. I stayed right on the stage.
So how many thousands of people would it be?
Oh, I'd say 20,000 plus.
Wow.
The huge Astro Hall. Now, I don't know an exact figure, but it was big. It was the biggest dance that I ever played, because I never drew that many, but they did. And Texas is dance country. They dance, and they still dance in Texas. But, I mean, it was country music country, and they would come out, whether you were working in an auditorium or whether you were working a dance hall or the Astro Hall. They come out in abundance.
Was there a point in time you said, I've had enough of this traveling?
I'm glad you brought that up. There was. As a matter of fact, I've worked with Ernest all that time, and also for a little while there, I've done some booking for him and the Troubadours. I booked some dates for him with Atlas Artist Bureau and talked to Jack Cressy. I talked to Jack at KVOO, and I think he called the house in Hendersonville, and he said, I think we may be going country. He said, I talked to Harold Stewart, and Harold's going to go over and visit with the folks at WBAP that own the newspaper there and own WBAP radio. And I can't remember their names, and I should. In Fort Worth, Texas. Bill Mack was there on the air at the time. And the station was doing good. They were playing country music 24 hours a day. That's all they were playing. Jack said he was trying to get Harold Stewart together with the gentleman over in Fort Worth, and they did. I think Harold went to Fort Worth and visited with him. They got talking money and how the station was doing and this type of thing, and it was very successful. So Harold decided that they were going to go country. I moved back on the strength of Jack Cressy and went to work at KTOW in Sand Springs, Oklahoma. Worked for Buddy Powell over there.
So is that where Jack Cressy was, at KTOW?
Yeah, he was over there at one time, but he was already at KVOO at this time.
Okay, so he calls from KVOO and says, we're going to go to country.
Said, we're thinking about changing, going country.
But then you go to KTOW?
Yeah, because there was going to be a period of time in there, 6 months or something, before that decision was definite, before I could say anything about it. And then when they made that decision, of course, I left KTOW and joined KVOO.
Was KTOW country?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was country station.
All right, so did he arrange, come on up here and work for KTOW?
He talked to Buddy Powell, who was a manager at KTOW.
Did he know that KVO was going to go?
He didn't know that.
So Jack was just probably calling him, would you do my friend a favor?
Yeah, said he's coming back to Tulsa. That's exactly what happened.
Then you were coming back to an area that people knew, Billy Parker. I mean, you had made quite a splash around it.
Yeah, because we had been here playing with Ernest and the Troubadours 3 or 4 times.
Right.
So I guess momentum-wise, I maybe have been known here fairly well, but not.
Well, sure you were. You're on television.
We'd already done the TV thing.
Yeah,
and everything.
So we've already talked about the town knew who Billy Parker was.
Yeah.
And then you came back again, so it was all comfortable territory for you.
Yeah, it was good. As a matter of fact, I mentioned earlier, we left Tulsa in United Van Lines, and I left Nashville in a U-Haul it, and I drove the U-Haul it, and Jerry drove the car home, and we packed our own furniture, and Billy Joe was just a couple years old. I didn't want to be away from them that long. We'd be on the road with Ernest 30 days. Longest I remember is, I think we were gone 26 days away from home, and I just got tired of it.
Talk about that a little bit. That just has to be wearing on a people.
John used to, we would go by E.T., Ernest Tubb's house, and we'd pack albums, and I'm talking about LPs, on the bus for a tour. Never under 12 days, never over 26 or 30, and we'd be gone. I mean, we would be gone. It gets lonesome. You call home, but in those days, you had to travel to make the bucks. And you had to travel to pay for the bus, although it was an old bus. You had to travel to pay for the hotels. You had to travel to pay for everything that you did, and the family back home. And E.T. had a pretty big family, too, you know. So we actually just stayed on the road too much. Boy, the artists nowadays will go out for 2 or 3 days, and boy, they got it made. But you don't find anybody out there for 30 days or 25 days.
The fans see you on stage and it looks like such a glorious life, and you're a big star and all that, and they go home to their lives and you're just doing sounds like drudgery.
You have to really love the business back in those days to stay on the road that long. I loved the business, but I loved the family too.
Yeah. So it was time, wasn't it? It was time to move.
Yep.
And Jack Cressy did you a big favor by calling you.
Yeah, he did.
And
he really did. He said, we're going country, and I want you to do morning drive. And Bill Mack was on WBAP doing the all-night show. And I said, Jack, you know what I'd like to do? I said, I'd like to do midnight to 5. He said, you're crazy. And I remember him trying to talk me out of it, and I said, that's what I'd like to do. And he hired me to do midnight to 5.
How long did you do that, midnight to 5?
8.5 years.
KVOO. And you were talking to truckers?
Yeah, I had the Big Rigger Club, talking to truckers everywhere.
And were you singing then, too? I suppose you were.
I was doing picking and grinning. That's part of the deal.
Because you did dates around here.
I did dates here and in Louisiana and Texas and Kansas and around the area. I'd go out and still do my dates, yeah, and record. And he made that possible. I got to give Ron Blue and Jack Cressy credit for really believing in me and hanging in there with me.
Yeah. Jack Cressy was manager at KVOO for many years.
Yes, he was.
I came here in 76. He was manager then, and Ron Blue was my manager at KRMG. And times were different in radio then, weren't they?
You can't believe now what we had the opportunity to do back then, and I couldn't even believe it then. But Jack Cressy and Ron Blue had got together, and you and I, we were 100,000 watts one morning on KVOO and KRMG.
Because we were both 50,000 watt
That's
stations.
right, and talking with each other and visiting, and that's another thing that I will never, ever forget, because that's just not even thinkable nowadays, you know.
KRMG was not playing country, so we weren't competing with you there, but it was the news station in town, and then playing some pop music and maybe some big band stuff.
But in a way, we were competing.
But there's no question we were competing. But still, the two of them had known each other for all those years,
yes,
and were friends and carried on that very good relationship, even to the point where I would have you on the radio. I don't know what I would talk to you about, but we did.
We did. We talked about a lot of things, and as a matter of fact, our ratings, the station ratings, KRMG, KVO, were both very good. It seemed like one time around, you'd be number one.
Yep.
Next time around, we'd be number one. I mean, that was the good old days.
In fact, I remember you at KVO's numbers were really strong, and I think we started lacing in some country because we thought we could capture some of that audience.
I remember that. That worried Jack a little bit.
Yeah.
I remember that.
He probably thought we were going to go all country.
Wasn't that during the Urban Cowboy stuff?
In that period of time.
Yeah.
Right. That's something that would never occur today, of course. The competition is so stiff and so tight. as it was then, too. It still was.
Yes, it was.
Ron Blue would come out with the numbers, well, KVO is beating us. Oh, we were down in the dumps. KVO was, well, today, now, then coming back again. Oh, KRMG is beating KVO.
I know. Jack Crash say, oh, my gosh, they're getting us on this. I know. I lived through that stuff.
Well, they were good days.
From doing the all-night show to program director to operations director to now, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we should talk a bit about the owner of KVOO, who is Harold Stewart.
Yes.
Now, Harold Stewart was a real dude. He was a lawyer in town. He was involved in international relations. He married Joan Skelly, who was a daughter of the oil man here in Tulsa, W.G. Skelly.
Yes.
She preceded him in death, but then he married Frances Langford Evinrude in 94, and she preceded him in death as well. I could go on and on about him because he was an outstanding person. He enlisted in the Army Corps in 42. He served as Advanced Officer, Director of Intelligence, in charge of operational intelligence for the Corps as it went from England to France, Luxembourg, Belgium, and Germany. After the war ended, he served as an intelligence officer in Norway, and he left active duty in 46 as a colonel, but remained in the Air Force Reserve until 1972. Then, of course, of all these things he did, he owned KVOO. So tell us about him. You must have had interaction with him, and would he come through the station and talk to you?
Yes. As a matter of fact, he had talked to me as operations director and program director. I had the responsibility of listening to him quite often. Little stories I can tell, and this kind of goes back to the Air Force and his career. At the radio station, we tried to keep a clean ship, okay? You keep the floors clean, of course, make sure the waste paper baskets are emptied. Now, I was on the air as a disc jockey and also in operations with him. He'd say, come go with me a minute. And I'd walk outside with him. He says, see along the road out there, there's all that paper and all this stuff out there. He said, they don't look very good for the people driving by the station. He said, let's get out there and get that done. He said, you don't have to get out there, but get somebody to get out there and get it done. Well, needless to say, I got somebody to get out there and get it done, but I went with him. And I'd get out there and pay. I mean, he was a good boss. He was a good teacher. Lord, he taught me more about the world just visiting with him. Like with E.T., I learned more about the country music business with E.T. I learned more about, not particularly radio, but learned more about the world talking to Harold Stewart. I remember a couple of times he would go along like on the door facings, right above the door facings, you know. He'd lick his finger and put it across the top of the door there and say, see that dust? Lord, I'd never looked up there at home probably or anywhere else for it, but he did. Oh, he was strict, and yet he was so good. And I'll never forget one time I was doing a program out at the Sheraton out south of Tulsa. I was actually emceeing an event. The podium was kind of low where I was reading from, and some of the people I had to introduce, I was kind of bent over a little bit and reading, and he came up to me and hit me on the back of the shoulder there, and he said, stand up straight when you're talking. I try to stand up straight anywhere I go now because of it. It's hard to do at my age, but I'll never forget. And I'll never forget serving on the board at Southwestern Sales, which was a part of KVOO and the oil business and the whole thing. And John Stewart, his son, who's a very good friend of mine and such a wonderful person. And I was an old country boy from Tuskegee, Oklahoma. I didn't know nothing, but I served on the Southwestern Sales board. Harold Stewart, and then the people on the board would be there, and John Stewart would always sit next to me, and he would nudge me when it was yay or nay. He'd nudge me this way, or if it's nay, he'd do his head this way, you know, so I'd know how to live on the board. I guess the finest people that I could have ever met. And on top of that, when he, of course, sold the radio station to the Great Empire people, the great Empire people, which are wonderful folks, Mike Lynch and them, when he sold to them, there was a lot of questions about savings that we had made through the station and keeping our program going and mustering out with our money. He held back, and he would not sell and sign the papers until the agreement that they would honor all of our financing and everything. And if it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't have this polo shirt on today. No, if it hadn't been for him, life would have been a heck of a lot tougher. He was so fair. The Stewart family was so fair to us.
Retirement money.
The retirement money, yes, that's what it was.
That's what he was protecting.
Yes,
to make sure Great Empire honored that and kept it in place.
And I think they would have anyway, but I'm not sure, and he wasn't sure, and he made sure on paper. And like I say, if it wasn't for Harold Stewart and the Stewart Corporation, it would not be as pleasant for my family today as it is. And I appreciate them very much, and appreciate all the folks that I've worked with in radio, because it all built up to that.
Was his personality gruff?
Well, he spoke gruff. To a certain extent, but he was military. What can I say? I mean, he was military in everyday life, but he was a kind person. It's good to be able to talk to someone who's gone and say how kind they were, and the Stewart family were very, very kind people. I never did know Skelly. I never did know W.G. Skelly, or that end of it, but...
Did you ever meet Joan Skelly, Harold's wife?
Oh, yeah. She was always kind and nice to me, very much so.
Jack Cressy then was the manager at that time.
Yes, I worked with Jack for many years. Even at KFMJ, Jack sold advertising, and then at KTOW he sold, then stepped into KVOO.
You worked for Safeway stores.
Yeah, I was very young then. I told you I worked for QuikTrip. I worked at Safeway stores at 11th and Yale. As a matter of fact, a guy by the name of Charlie Corbin, who actually later became a deputy sheriff in Tulsa County. I needed a job. I forget the year. I don't know when it was, but I'll never forget the situation. He asked me, "Have you had experience in produce?" I said, "Yeah, I had experience in produce. I need a job. I need to go to work." So he hired me in the produce department. I think it went maybe a couple of 3 days, not very long. And a shipment of bananas came in. The bananas were in wooden crates at that time. We're in the wooden crate things with the wire on them and everything, you know. I was supposed to display the bananas up on the produce shelf there. So I opened the boxes. Bananas come on stalks, and I split all the bananas and had them in ones. 1 banana, 2 banana, 3. Had them all put up there real neat. But I cut them apart. And needless to say, I got fired. That's true. I got fired.
Was that before the QuikTrip days?
Yes, yeah, that was before the QuikTrip days. I needed a job then, too.
You told me that Garth Brooks' mother, Colleen Carroll, was a singer.
Oh, yes, a very good singer.
She sang country, obviously.
Yes, she did. As a matter of fact, I had the opportunity to work with her in Fairfax, Oklahoma, at Jumps Roller Rink many years ago. Wonderful singer. I got acquainted with her and with her children. They were wonderful people.
Did you know Garth then as a child?
No, I didn't know Garth back then. As a matter of fact, I didn't meet Garth till later years. Of course, Garth married Sandy, who lived in Owatsa, Oklahoma. So I got acquainted with them from the standpoint of friendship. I never was real close with them or anything, but they're great people, and we're great people. And, of course, I followed Garth's career throughout the years. But his mother had 3 children. Jim Smittle and Colleen lived here in Tulsa, and I worked with Floyd Cherry and the Tulsa Ramblers and with them at Fairfax, Oklahoma many years ago, and I have an interview that I have and had her on my show before she passed on.
He gets his ability for music from his mother, then.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes, I'm very sure.
And you talked about urban country.
Yeah, I remember when he was in Stillwater. As a matter of fact, I remember working a date with him at Binks Club. You're bringing it out of me again, but Binks Club in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I opened the show, and Reba McEntire's brother, I brought him on. And then I think Garth opened for us. Yeah, Garth Brooks and Santa Fe, the band Santa Fe, opened for us over there. And they were wonderful then. And I know he was writing them, but I wasn't that acquainted with him then at all.
Yeah. He was quite a self-promoter, wasn't he? He knew how to promote himself.
Yes, and he still does.
Right.
Garth went to Nashville, and of course the story's been told, and he's told the story, that he had some disappointing times in Nashville. Yeah, if it hadn't have been for his sense of promotion in his mind and his sense of loving the business, he'd never made it. It never made it in the business because there were so many artists, and still are, but there were so many artists in the business at the time, and everybody was looking for a songwriter, singer, entertainer, all together in one package thing, which that proved to be the truth later in the business, too. He fit all that, and I feel like he stayed in there and made them like him because he had the talent to pursue. I don't know all the story about his career, which he'd have to tell you that, but I know he was a go-getter in college at OSU. Had the experience and had the want to go ahead, and he loved his mother and dad, Raymond Brooks. He loved them very much and learned from Mama, just like you said, he learned from his mother. I never was real acquainted with Garth, except I knew his stepbrothers and stepsister very well in the early years, but I never did really get, some people you get to know, and I've never been one to sort of force myself on anybody. I mean, in other words, you know me, I'm Billy Parker, I never did that. I play his records, still play his records, his songs, but I've never been that close to him.
Did you ever think to yourself, I wonder if I had been a real self-promoter myself? Because you probably weren't.
No, I wasn't.
You were kind of laid back and you let the music work for you, and if it became popular, fine. If not, you weren't going to force yourself on anybody.
Yeah, and I'm still that way. I won't do that. I don't know that I could have ever been any different than I am from the standpoint of the business, but I don't think that I could ever call somebody up and tell them how great I am. I couldn't do that. Now, some people could, maybe. Maybe that's the ones that make it, but I feel like I've made it in life just being me,
Okay, I'm throwing out some names here. Sheb Woolley, Roger Miller.
New Roger. I knew Roger Miller. As a matter of fact, Roger Miller and Marvin McCullough went to the Tulsa Motel on East 11th Street. Roger was appearing here in Tulsa on a weekend on a show, I think at the auditorium at the Civic Center, I think. And they charged the room to me for the weekend. I think it's Bill Wimberly, Roger Miller, and Marvin McCullough. They skipped and didn't pay the bill. And the folks at the Tulsa Motel called me to collect. Of course, I didn't pay.
Did they leave the name behind? Charges to Billy Parker?
Yeah. Everything was charged to me, to Tulsa Motel. I don't know if they served drinks. I don't think it was that much. But, yes, definitely, they did. I'll never forget that. And I haven't talked about that either, but that's the truth.
Jean Shepherd?
Yes. I met Jean, knew Jean, even knew when she was married to Hawkshaw Hawkins before he was killed in the plane crash with Patsy Cline, as a matter of fact, and Cowboy Copas. They were all killed in the plane crash going back from Kansas City. When I say I know someone, I don't want to make it sound like that I was top-notch friends with him, but have worked shows with her when I was with Ernest Tubb.
Did you fly much in touring? You're mostly in buses, I suppose.
We were in buses most of the time. The only time we'd fly, we'd go into Seattle and we'd fly to Alaska to do the shows in Alaska. Mm-hmm. I have flown to Alaska with Ernest.
The music business has lost tragically too many people to plane crashes. At any rate, you weren't necessarily part of that traveling mode.
No.
1975, you were named Disc Jockey of the Year by the Academy of Country and Western Music, and yes, in 77 and 78 and 84. What a nice honor. You have other honors, of course, but that was nice for you in the 70s.
That was very nice. I must say that at the time I was with KVOO Radio doing the all-night show. Had a lot of acquaintances and people who actually belonged to the Academy of Country Music and to the Country Music Association in Nashville. Made friends with a lot of those people, and those are the voting people. I had the opportunity to go to L.A., I think, 4 times. We went out once to get the Radio Station of the Year award, and at the same time I had the DJ of the Year award, the Academy thing. I don't know how I won it that many times, but just good people, I guess you might say.
In that time, you scored your first chart hit, I believe, with It's Bad When You're Caught with the Goods.
Yeah, I did record that.
In 76.
Wife didn't like that song, but yeah, It's Bad When You're Caught with the Goods. I recorded that, and actually the song, I guess, that did more than anything in the charts was Lord, If I Make It to Heaven, Can I Bring My Own Angel Along? And she liked that song.
Then you had a series of singles, including a tribute to Ernest Tubb. Thanks, E.T., thanks a lot.
Yes, I did.
Did you write that?
As a matter of fact, I didn't write it. A boy in Texas wrote the song and sent it to me. I put some words in it, yes, but I didn't take credit for writing it.
In 82, you had a big success at Who's Gonna Sing the Last Country Song? Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Daryl McCall was a great singer, worked with Ray Price, worked with George Jones, and worked on his own. He recorded with me. We recorded that song in Nashville, Who's Gonna Sing the Last Country Song. It was fairly good on the charts, but I don't remember the exact numbers. Like I said before, they didn't reach the top notch, but we tried.
83, Something Old, Something New?
Did that with Jack Green, the late Jack Green. Jack Green passed on, and as a matter of fact, 2013. He recorded that with me, and we recorded an album with Ernest Tubb, Webb Pierce, Jack Green, Cal Smith, Bill Carlisle, and other folks that were on the album.
The album in 88 was Always Country.
Yeah.
1990, you did a gospel record.
Yes, I did. I recorded I'll Speak Out For You, Jesus. That's the title of the album. And along about that time's when all the school controversy was coming up about Christ in school. And I recorded a song called Let's Bring Jesus Back to School.
Was that written by you?
No. And also the Dallas Kids Choir sung that with me in Dallas, Texas.
Huh. Mm-hmm. Was church a part of your life? Did you have a faith that was...
Yes. Now I call me Babacostal, okay? But in the early years, we were Pentecostal. My folks were Pentecostal. This is a combination. My dad was a Methodist. My mother was, I guess you might say, Babacostal, because that's kind of what I am. I always say this. What religion are you? Babacostal. I believe in God. And
so what does that mean?
Kind of a halfway between a Baptist and a Pentecost.
Oh, it's Babacostal.
Babacostal. That's
right.
My explanation. But we go to church at First Baptist, Tulsa, Reverend Spoo. That's where we attend church.
Unexpected Heartaches was a song for you?
I wrote that song.
All right.
That made the charts back in those days, but back in those days it was so easy to make a chart. You didn't need payola, that's for sure. Glad Records. I wrote the song Out of Your Heart and a few songs that didn't really make it, but I was on radio at the time and
you could play your own song.
We could play it. David Ingle could play it, and Willie the Hillbilly could play it, yeah.
Other songs, you wrote the song Just a Drink Away?
Yeah, Bobby Lewis and I wrote that song, and Ernest recorded that song.
Did that do well for him?
It was the B-side. That's the story of my life. The B-side, it was the B-side of the record. It was small, but it was an honor that he recorded it.
Doggone the Heartache?
Yeah, we wrote that song. How did you know all this stuff?
I just know all this stuff.
Okay.
Did songs come to you so you wrote them immediately on inspiration, or did you have to struggle, or how did that work?
You can tell by listening to most of my music, I never struggled to write them. But Bobby Lewis and I wrote Doggone This Heartache, and I still get small BMI checks, royalty checks on that, very small. And then Carl Blue and I wrote a song called Everything That Glitters Isn't Gold that Ray Pillar recorded. Carl Blue, who's from Salina, Oklahoma, of course, the late Carl Blue, when Decca dropped me, when I said I went to Nashville recording for Owen Bradley, and I left Nashville owing Bradley, this is about the truth. And then Carl Blue got me back on Decca, and we did a song called The Ladder of Success, which was fair. It did pretty good, but nothing fantastic.
How did you meet your wife, Jerry, and how many years have you been married to her now?
Jerry and I have been married since 1966.
That's a long time. A lot of performers don't stick with their spouses that long.
You know what? She's pretty strong. She's a pretty strong woman. We met at the Johnny Lee Wills Rodeo. I was working there with Roy Ferguson and his band and Johnny Lee Wills, as a matter of fact. I met her there, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jerry and I went together about 6-8 weeks, and we got married.
How old were you?
29. So we've been married, well, I've been with KVOO 43 years. I was with KFMJ, and we got married in 1966.
And you referred to KVOO as you're still with them. You're still working for KVOO.
There's 5 radio stations in the building, okay? KVOO is a big part of our broadcasting facility.
KVOO-FM now.
Right, KVOO-FM. The old KVOO-AM is now KFAQ,
And it's a talk station.
It's a talk station, right.
So you're performing on which station now?
Big Country 99.5, which is in the same building with KVOO.
Right. So you do a 2-hour program?
Right. I go in on Wednesday. I do a 2-hour program that runs on Saturday morning from 8 to 10, and on Sunday evening, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Then I handle about 15, 18 accounts.
Okay, so you're still active here at the age of 75.
I try to be. I'm afraid to stop.
Right. All right, let me throw out these names to you that you have worked with. Sonny James?
Yes, I have. Sonny James was a wonderful singer, a wonderful writer, and I still get a Christmas card from Sonny and Doris every year.
He had one or two that were signatures of him.
Of course, Young Love was a signature song of his.
Red Foley, we've talked about.
Yes, I had the opportunity to work with Red Foley in 1957. Actually, previous to going to Springfield, Missouri, I worked for Triangle Blueprint, Tulsa Camera Record, J.D. Young Company, and a lot of good companies in Tulsa. And I met some people that knew a promoter that was very close to Red Foley. The lady's name was Mary John Wilkin and her husband Art Wilkin. They were moving from Tulsa to Springfield, Missouri. So I decided I would move up there with them, and I did for a while. And I met a gentleman named James P. Coleman who promotes shows all over the country. Well, he promoted the Red Foley show, and Red was doing the Ozark Jubilee. I wasn't a member of the Ozark Jubilee, but I would go out on the road a couple of weeks before the show would get to town, and I'd sell tickets for fire department, police department, or Sertoma, or whatever it might be. I'd sell the tickets, and then when the show would come to town, I'd get to do 2 songs with Red Foley. And Red would call me out on stage. It's before E.T. and before all that. Red would call me out on stage to do a couple of songs. And I'd do the songs, and he'd pat me on the head, and I'd walk off, mind my own business.
You mentioned Johnny Lee Wills. Did you actually perform with him? Or?
Oh, yes. Johnny Lee, I performed with him on radio. I took him to Nashville with me to record a couple of songs that he did on the album. We did the Milk Cow Blues and Take Me Back to Tulsa. It was my session, and I invited him to be on the session with me. And in the studio with all the pickers, the musicians, you wouldn't even know I was there, because Johnny Lee Wills was everybody's friend. They all knew the Wills family, Bob Wills, Luke Wills, and Billy Jack Wills, and all that. So we had the opportunity to visit with all the musicians, and they loved it because Johnny Lee was there. And that's one of the most memorable times I've had in the studio, really.
Did you work with Bob Wills, his brother?
Yes, I did. Only when I was with Ernest Tubb on a Have People's tour, I worked 4 or 5 shows. I'm not sure, but I know I worked 4 or 5 shows with him. He only had a guitar player with him and himself, and we backed him, meaning the musicians, the Texas Troubadours backed Bob Wills on these shows. And I had the opportunity to visit with him. This was after he had had his first stroke. But he was still very alert and very nice and very kind, and I remember him as being a very kind person.
Was there a difference in personalities between Bob Wills and Johnny Lee Wills?
A lot. Yeah, there was a difference in personalities. Like I say, being only on 4 or 5 shows with Bob, I didn't learn a lot about his personality, but because his personality since the first stroke had kind of lessened a little bit, I'm sure. But Johnny Lee was more personable than anybody that I've ever met in the business, even more so than some of the artists that I worked with on the road. Yeah, Johnny Lee was just a super guy. He even got me in my first boots sized up right because he said I was wearing my boots too tight. Yeah, I enjoyed Johnny Lee Wills very much, a great friend.
So he obviously liked you. I mean, there had to be a nice relationship there with you.
I think there always was, and I always respected him very, very much.
Did you do work in Branson?
Yes, I did. I think 26 TV shows there, actually, for the network with Stan Hitchcock, the Americana Network. We went around to the various artists in the various theaters and interviewed. Actually, I didn't do the show from the standpoint of singing or performing, but I interviewed the various acts. I interviewed a lot of people in Branson in that period of time. I didn't live there, but we spent a lot of time there back and forth doing 26 shows, 13 weeks and then another 13 weeks, but I didn't just stay in Branson all that time.
The shows were headlined by?
Well, Roy Clark, for instance, B.J. Thomas, the Mandrells, the Lennon Sisters. That's just some of them I can remember.
So you were part of their shows?
Actually, I had the opportunity to interview them, and then we showed a part of their show in the production.
Did you ever think about wanting to live there and perform?
I thought about it. As a matter of fact, I bought a place up on Table Rock Lake, up in Hollister, which is right out of Branson. We would commute back and forth. I had my RV, my motorhome up there. I left it up there, and we'd go back and forth and had the boat dock and everything there. Enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy the back and forth 250 miles every weekend, you know.
From
Broken Arrow to Hollister, Missouri, to Branson in the Hollister area.
Yeah. Andy Williams was one of the first there. Did you meet him, and were you around him at all?
No, never met him, but I did attend his show one year, a Christmas show, as a matter of fact, that I'll never forget. I think he was one of the finest personalities, finest singers. I really enjoyed him.
Out of your past, Loretta Lynn?
Yes. I met Loretta, in fact, with Ernest. See, they recorded together. They recorded a hit record called Sweet Thing together. I had the opportunity to work shows with her and with E.T. Never did get real acquainted with her, but I knew her and her husband also, who passed on. Mm-hmm. I knew them just through E.T.
Conway Twitty?
Conway Twitty, nicest guy. He recorded a song. Cal Smith recorded it first, I believe it was, and Loretta and Conway recorded the games that daddies play and used my name in it. My friend Billy Parker's dad came by. You know, they honored me, but I didn't know it until after it was released, but I appreciated it anyway.
Jim Ed Brown?
Jim Ed Brown. I've worked a lot of shows with Jim Ed on the road with the Abe Hamza tours out of New York. Worked in Canada and the state of New York and all over the place. I had the opportunity to play golf once with him. I didn't play very good, but I played. He is such a gentleman, such a nice gentleman. And he was here in Tulsa recently at one of the event centers, and I had the opportunity to MC the show that he was on.
One thing I was going to point out, KVOO was 50,000 watts, 24 hours. KRMG is only 50,000 watt daytime. They're 25,000 at night. When you were on from midnight to 5 on a 50,000 watt radio station, you blanketed, I don't know if it's the nation or how far out your signal went. How far did it go?
Well, actually, it didn't blanket the nation because of the fact that it was westbound. We got back to the southeast pretty good, up to the north fair, out west gigantic. Weather had a lot, as you know. Weather had a lot to do with it. I remember one time I was doing an album giveaway on the Truckers show, on the Big Rigger show, and a guy in Bangor, Maine, called in. Now, I don't know if he was listening in his truck or where he was at, and told me when he'd be through town to pick up his album, and he came right down Peoria, and he picked up his album there on South Peoria. I forget who he drove for. I don't think I even had it written down anywhere, but he come to pick up his album, and he was in Bangor, Maine, listening to us. I said, we don't go to Bangor, Maine. He said, you do tonight. I remember that. I remember that.
A nighttime personality for KRMG was Johnny Martin.
Yes.
You remember Johnny Martin
yes.
well, and he was a musician, and he played big band music. But he wasn't necessarily competing at the same time slot with you. He was on like from 6 to midnight.
Yeah, he was on earlier.
And then you were on from midnight to 5 o'clock.
I used to listen to him. I listened to Johnny. Yes, I did. I listened to him and enjoyed the big band music. I enjoy other types of music. I mean, I love country, and country is my favorite. But let's face it, if you listen over the years or follow it, the country music has changed a great deal, to a great extent. I enjoy some of it. I don't just live all of it, now, but it's changed to a great extent, and I've watched a lot of changes over the years.
Was that tough to see? Because country, for you at the time, did fade away in the national consciousness of America. It stayed with a certain group of people. Was that tough for you to see that happening?
Yes, it was. It was tough for me to see it happening because of the fact that when it got to the point to where the story was gone, or the story of the song was hidden under instruments, and you couldn't understand what they were singing about. Even if they were singing about a broken heart, you'd never know it. Yeah. The feeling was gone. They're great artists. Like George Strait is one of my favorite artists. Alan Jackson, one of my favorite artists. They're still hot and heavy, although George Strait is saying he's retiring in the business, but I've heard that before too. Some music I love outside of country music because I can still understand what they're singing about, whether it be pop or even classical. If it's good classical, I can listen to it. It's not my favorite, but I can listen to it. In fact, for a change, it's kind of enjoyable.
Here you are, 75, you're really not done. Are you performing musically anymore?
Only if I'm asked, and I'm seldom ever asked. No, I do a TV thing. In fact, I went to Joplin and recorded a TV thing here recently for educational TV, which I think will be on Rogers State College or those type of stations. But I don't do a lot of that. I don't thrive on that. I'll MC some gigs, which we call them in the business once in a while, but I don't play anymore. And with my arthritis, my guitar was bad enough before the arthritis, but I don't play it anymore.
Well, you just recently emceed Roy Clark's 80th birthday bash, as they called it, at the River Spirit Casino.
Yes.
Owned by the Creek Nation. So you did that and had a good time with Roy?
As a matter of fact, Roy is one of the best times you could possibly have and one of the nicest guys you could ever meet. And knowing him over the years has been a pleasure. And I've worked with a lot of people at the River Spirit Event Center emceeing when they have the country shows in. I enjoy doing that. If they call, I'm there.
Yeah. And you still do TV commercials today.
Let's see. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I've been doing the Miller family for 40-some years, 42 years, I believe.
That's quite a string, and that's Ernie Miller, Pontiac, GMC.
Ernie Miller, Pontiac, GMC, now Mark Miller, Buick, GMC. And still, I'm driving a Buick. Jerry's driving an Acadia.
The music world has been really wonderful to you, hasn't it?
John, really and truthfully, I don't know how I could have had it any other way and been halfway sane. I love the business, and I guess that's the reason I still do it. I play classic country on Big Country 99.5, as you know, and it's not the most popular music with today's younger audience. It's just not, and I realize that. But I still have people in the younger audience segment that love some of the older music. So I don't look at demographics, I look at listeners. I never did look at ratings. I never did pay much attention to ratings. That's terrible to say, to be in radio. I'd love to be number one. But if I'm number 5 and I have listeners and they appreciate what I'm doing, then I like where I'm at.
So how would you like to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered as a caring guy, a person who cares for other people, and at the same time, a person that don't expect sympathy because I'm not playing the old country every day like I used to play. And I'd like to be remembered as a person that everybody likes, which that probably would be impossible, but still, that's what I'd like.
Well, I'm saying to you that percentage-wise, there's probably 95% have got to like Billy Parker. I mean, what's not to like about you? You were just given that God-given talent. Your personality is as big as your music ability, and the two of them you've combined. And radio, there are a lot of singers who could never be on the radio. They could never pull that off. But you have taken both your personality and your music ability, and you've combined them in one to be the much-loved Billy Parker.
I can't follow that.
What would be a favorite song for Billy Parker?
That I've recorded?
That you like or whatever? Yeah, that would be part of your life, a recording, right?
My favorite song that I've recorded is Can I Bring My Own Angel Along?
And how does that go?
Lord, if I make it to heaven, can I bring my own angel along?
Sing it.
Oh, Lord. you got me now, Lord, prepare me no mansion. If a mansion's what you had in mind, Lord, there's just one thing I'm asking. When you lift up this spirit of mine, Lord, can I keep this same woman I've loved here on earth for so long? Lord, when I make it to heaven, can I bring my own angel along?
Very good. Amen. Amen.
I can't even
Thank you, Billy.
I remembered the words.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Billy.
Thank you, John. I'll tell you what, this has brought back me that I didn't even know was there.
Yeah. Well, it was fun, and you were very giving. I appreciate it very much.
Well, bless your heart. Don't think I don't appreciate it. In fact, I was telling Jerry, the wife, the people that you have, I said, they're too esteemed, too highfalutin for me, but by God, I'm proud to be in there with them.
Absolutely. And I've told a number of people that I was going to interview Billy Parker, and they said, oh, yes, we're anxious to hear his story. So there are people who want to hear it.
You got more out of me than the wife ever did.